What's up, everybody? My name's Kyle, aka Clean, and I will be talking about index color separations. Now, why index color separations, you may ask? Well, there's several pros to using an index color separation, and the one I like the most is that you're never printing wet on wet. In other words, your dots are always going to be side next to each other, and for that reason, you'll never get any kind of tonal shift. Your runs will be consistent from one print run to another print run. And you can take those films and give them to another shop and they should look, providing they color match everything correctly, the exact same. Now, there's also some other benefits. Your dots, as you can see on the left there, are going to be in a random pattern. As opposed to the dots on the right, which are more conformed. They're in a pattern, so that when you print a wet on wet with a halftone dot, sometimes you get something called a moire, or a pattern within the dots. With the index color separations, you do not get that. Another benefit is that it doesn't matter quite what color of garment you are printing on. Your callouts will always be the same, and you can print on dark or light depending on how you make your base. And the images are all very bright with very high contrast. Now, all that being said, there is some cons to doing an index color separation. One of them being that the colors in the image have to be replicated. So if there are 8 colors in the image, you have to do 8 films, which means you have to have a press that can do 8 films, which sometimes is tough. Now, in this tutorial, I'll be using an image with probably 3 or 4 colors, so I'll show that an index color separation can be done with less colors, but that is one of the drawbacks. Also, your image can get a posterized look because we are taking out all the anti-aliasing. Sometimes when you do try to do smooth gradients and whatnot, it tends to look, I would say, dotty, for lack of a better word, or posterized. Also, the dots are printed next to each other and not on top of each other, so that if you're trying to get any kind of tonal shift on press, you won't be able to. It also makes doing the color separation a little bit more tough in that you can't really make tonal curve adjustments or level adjustments. Your image is what it is, and to change something means you pretty much have to re-index and re-output all the films. That being said, let's jump into it. So the first thing I do when doing any kind of color separations is I like to look at the image and kind of decide for myself how should I approach it. So let's open up some artwork here. I'm getting this off of a site called Pixabay. It has a public domain, free for commercial use, no attribution required. Let's go ahead and download this. We'll save it to my desktop. Close that out and open it up in Photoshop. Now, the first thing I always do with an image is I trim it. That way we kind of get rid of some of the blank space. It will make a difference when we start looking at the image size. Now, we notice this image looks pretty big, but the resolution is tiny. So for index color separations, you want to stick between 180 to 200 dpi. And with that means you'll probably have to use 305 or 330 screens to get that size dot to show up. So let's go ahead and make this 200. Oh, I'm going to cancel out of that. Let's go ahead and take off the resampling. We'll make this 200, and you'll notice the image is about 7 inches wide by 6 inches tall. We'll okay that for now. Now, a lot of t-shirts you want bigger, And so to make it bigger, we are going to resample this. Now, I don't recommend doing so for a lot of images. However, let's kind of look on in here, and we look up in here, we see a lot of anti-aliasing. Now, when we resize this, just make it, we'll resample it. Let's make it real big, like 15 inches wide. What will happen is that our anti-aliasing in here just got a lot bigger. Now, that will make a difference. However, this image is going to be minimized. If you're doing some kind of text or something like that, that anti-aliasing around the edges is going to look not very good. So I don't recommend resampling this upwards, but for this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and do so. So now that I got the image sized how I want it, at this point is when I normally do some color adjustments, something that will put a little saturation in the image and stuff like that. There is a tutorial on how to do all that kind of stuff. However, this image doesn't really have very much color in it. So I'm going to do one thing here, and that is change it into a lab mode. Go to my lightness and put an unsharp mask on it. On my lightness channel, as you can see there, unsharp mask. Now on this screen, what I tend to do is keep the amount. You can adjust it some. I tend to like it around 85, but it depends on the image. We'll keep our radius at 1 pixel and our threshold at 3. Now, it's really not making too much of a difference. We can see there's a little bit more contrast up in there as I go in and out, but that is looking pretty good. Now, to get it back, we just go to mode, RBG. Now, RBG is important. You'll notice if we have it in CMYK, and I'm going to turn all this back here, but if we go to CMYK and we try to go to bitmap, we can't. We'll have to convert to grayscale. Now, that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. The main thing is we want to just stay in RBG color. So at this point, let's do our index color separation. To do so, we hit index color, so I go to my image mode, index color, and I want to turn the preview off, and on my palette drop down use the custom, and let's just change our canvas to all white. Hit OK, hit OK, hit OK. And if we preview this, we'll notice that we're starting with a blank canvas. That's a good thing. Now, from here, we're going to start selecting our colors. Some important notes before we start selecting our colors is that we want to have our palette on custom, our options at a diffusion dither. If you have it to noise or pattern, you won't get that random effect I was talking about earlier. The amount will vary from image to image. I like to keep it between 80 and 100. That will just kind of show the dispersion of dots. So on this image, we are going to want some dispersed dots in here. So we're probably going to want something pretty high, maybe like a 95 or so. We can make adjustments on the fly as we go along. Now, let's start picking some colors here in this image. The first one I notice is t-shirt color, which is black. So we'll go ahead and select that. Next, I notice we have some white here. So let's select that. And now we kind of have to decide, okay, well, what colors are in this image? I'm seeing maybe 2 grays, possibly 3. Now, the amount of grays will depend on what size press you have. So always keep that in mind. If you're using a 4-color manual, then you want to keep the design under 4 colors, or 6-color manual, you'd want to keep the design under 6 colors. And on this, since we are printing this on a black shirt, we'll want to create a base. So we'll have to also keep the base in mind as well. That being said, we did pick the shirt color here, so we'll just keep the base in mind. We won't actually have to pick a color for the base just yet. So I'm seeing probably 2 grays in here, a dark gray and a light gray. So let's kind of look up in here and just kind of try to figure out what's going to be the best gray to use. I'm thinking somewhere in, nope, that's too light. Somewhere right around here, maybe a little lighter than that. And what I'm looking at is this color here. I don't want it too dark, but I don't want it too light. So that would be too light, and that would be too dark. So kind of in the middle there, maybe a color like that. Now these colors can be changed on press. So the actual color that we select here isn't going to make a difference other than determining what dots are what. So we just picked it dark gray. Now let's pick a lighter gray. Probably something pretty light, like right in there, maybe even a little lighter. I'm liking that light gray. We'll hit OK. Now you may think, oh, we just set it in stone. No, we didn't. When we click preview here, what I'm seeing is not much change in the image. We are taking out the anti-aliasing, and by that I mean if we zoom in here, oops, let's zoom in, we just got dots. So if I take off the preview and put on the preview, we can see where our dots are. For this image, this is looking pretty good. I generally like to keep it zoomed out some, kind of just get a feel of the overall image. So that's with the dots, that's without, that's the original, that's the index. I'm thinking we're looking pretty good here. Now I could hit OK and just move on, but what I like to always do is save this color palette. To do so, I go back to custom, hit save, and just name it. So the first thing I do is click name the design. Now sometimes your clients will name the design for you, otherwise you gotta name it, and we'll just call it colors and hit save and hit OK. That saved our colors. Now we can also mess around with the amount here. Let's take this slider way down and put it at 60%. Now, what just happened there? If we zoom in here, we notice we lost a lot of information. We don't want it at 60. Again, I usually keep it between 80 and 100. So let's look at this at 95. Thinking that looks pretty good. We're going to struggle a little to keep these dots here. That's why we're using a 300 screen. If we're using a 230 screen, these dots may not hold. So in that case, you'd probably want to bring this down maybe to an 80, and then you have more dots that are a little bit closer together and you don't have as diffuse amount. Maybe even take it down to 75. And you're still getting quite a bit, but we're going to be using 300, 305 screens. So let's go ahead and bump this back up. Hit OK. So right there, boom, our design is indexed. But if you notice, it doesn't look very good. That's okay. That's normal. Don't freak out. We go here and change it from image mode to RBG, and boom, the image looks good again. And that really didn't do anything except adjust how it looks on our screen. You could keep it in index and print films like that, but in reality, we want it to look like it's going to print on our screen. So to that end, let's start in on our color separations. Alright, so to do the color separations, the first thing I always do is load that color palette that we just saved. Oh wow, where did I save it? Oh, I saved it on my desktop, but you gotta change the file type it's looking for. We saved it as an .act file. That's just a color table, and we select it, hit load, and look, boom, bang, bing, we have all 4 colors here. Now this is our shirt color. We have white, 2 grays. Now that's okay, that's how we determined it. What we're going to do now is make channels, and to do so, a lot of people for simulated process, they go select color range. But if you notice on an index color separation, there is no halftones. We got rid of all that anti-aliasing, and so really it's just a solid color on a solid color. So you'd kind of treat this like a spot color, really, but it's not. It's close to it, but it's not spot. But you would treat it the same way you would treat a spot color, in that you're not putting any wet on wet ink, like I said earlier. So let's create our channels. Let's hit W or go to our magic wand tool here, and we can select the white. Now there are some things to be known about using the magic wand tool. For cases like this, I really have to be quite careful. The first thing is our tolerance. If you make that tolerance really high, say 100, and you select this gray here, notice we selected both grays. That's not a good thing. And so what we want to do is actually keep the tolerance at 0, and we do not want anti-aliasing. We actually took all that out, and we do not want any contiguous. If I do contiguous, you'll notice everything here is selected, but none of the white over here is selected. So no contiguous. Now we have our white selected, but the first thing we're going to do is not do our white. The first thing we're going to do here is create a shirt color. And in this case, we're doing black. Our solidity is going to be 100 for shirt color, and I'll explain that a little later. And I name it shirt color. Go back to my RBG. Now, we want to take out the black in this design, or specifically not select the black in this design, because that will be our shirt color. And so we have a couple different ways of doing it. The most easiest way of doing it is just ignoring the black. So let's select W, get our magic wand tool here, and you want to build your channels now. So we have a white channel that we'll be printing. So I magic wand, again, tolerance 0, no anti-aliasing, and contiguous unchecked. We'll select that and create a channel. Now this little button here does create a channel from selection, so that's good. And we did the white, and we can deselect this and then hit Command Control I, which inverts that image. Now on a simulated color process, you would never want to invert like that. And the reason being is that if you have a 20% value here, it's when you invert it, it turns into 80% value. But if you notice for an index color separation, it's either 100% or 0. And I'll show you. If we take our magic wand tool here and we put it over here, we have 100%. If we look at our K value here, we have 100% here, I select over that, so 100% or 0. There's no halftones. There's nothing, no wet on wet. It's either printed there or it's not printed there. That's one of the benefits. It's also one of the drawbacks of an index color separation. So we did make this a white color, so let's go ahead and do our white color. Oops, cancel. So let's make our channel a spot color. I'll explain the solidity a little bit more later, but for now we'll keep it kind of low. We'll select our white. I'm just going to put a random value in there, 85. I'll explain that a little later. Oh, we also want to name it, call it white, and then we move on to our next one. So we select RBG. Let's zoom out just a little and select our next color. Let's select the light gray. So now we're on that channel. Select the channel, hit Command or Control D, deselect everything, and then hit Command or Control I to inverse it. And that was our light gray. So again, I'll explain the solidity here in a second. And we select our light gray and we name it light gray. So as we can see, we're starting to build our colors on the shirt. Let's go back up to our RBG channels. Now let's select the dark gray. Again, select it. Select our channel here. Hit Command Control D and then Command and Control I. Let's give it a name, spot color, and this is our dark gray. Alright, so those are our colors in the image. Let's zoom out, and you'll notice it looks a little weird, and I'll explain why it looks a little weird here. One, we don't have a base. So when I put 85%, what I'm trying to do is mimic on screen on my monitor what this image is going to look like when we put it on press. So without a base, it's going to look pretty weird. So let's create our base now. There are several ways of creating a base, but I'll start with the most generic way, and that is to select all the channels here. And let's zoom in to see what we selected. I'm going to hit Control H so you can see I'm just hiding and showing the marching ants by hitting Control H. Control H, kind of see what our selection is here. Looks like we have all the colors. Let's move over to where there's white to make sure that the white's selected as well. And as you can see, it's all selected there. Now, the conventional way, or the way that you would think to do it is, boom, we make our base, we deselect, and we invert it. And you think, oh wow, that looks good. So let's call it white, and the base. And I called it not good. And the reason why I say it's not good is because that's not how you make your base. It may appear to be how you put your base on here, but in reality, if you do your base this way, what's going to happen is, and you can kind of see it in here, when we zoom out, what happens is when you print this on press, you're going to have a hard time lining up these little white dots with the light gray or the dark gray that goes on top. Notice that they're right sitting on top. That's going to be super hard to line up. So what you have to do is you have to choke it. And to choke it, you again select all your channels. And how I'm doing that is I'm hitting Control and selecting the first one here, and then holding down Shift and selecting the others as I hold down Control, clicking on those. So we have all our channels selected, and what we're going to do is modify, contract. Now, how much do we want to choke this design by? Well, that kind of depends on the image and the image resolution. Remember at the start here, we did this at 200 dpi. So at 200 dpi, contracting it by 1 pixel is actually going to make quite a big difference. Let's look at it. You'll notice now we're not putting any kind of underbase under all these little diffuse dots. And we are putting an underbase underneath these. So you kind of want to call it by ear. I think that this is dark enough where it's going to show on a black shirt, not be too dark. But traditionally, that's how you would create an underbase. So let's go ahead and make that an actual channel. Deselect by hitting Control or Command D. Inverse it, Control or Command I. And we'll make it a spot color. And the base I always put at 65%. And that's because if you put a one color pass over a black shirt, say you put white on a black shirt, that white is not a solid white. The shirt actually acts as a sponge, and it soaks up some of that ink. You'll actually see some of that black coming through. So to mimic that, we put the solidity at 65%, and we're going to create a white base, and we're going to call this underbase. And I always like to say choked. That way we know that that's our choked base. So let's put our not good base on top of our shirt color so we don't see it. And we'll move it. So move our good base underneath over the shirt color. So let's look at what we have now. And we'll zoom out here. And we're looking pretty good. So let's see here. Let's try to mimic what we're going to see on press. So we start on press and we have our shirt color, and then we lay down our underbase, and then we lay down on top of our underbase a dark gray. So that's our dark gray print. And then we're laying down a light gray. And then we're laying down a highlight white. And that highlight white is not looking as good as I thought it might. If we notice up in here, we're kind of losing a little. When we zoom in, it doesn't look so bad. What's happening there is that our Photoshop is pretty smart. So what it's doing is it's compensating, because they know we're creating channels over here. They know that we're going to use this for a print. And so the way it compensates, if we go into our color separations, for our spot channels here, it's adding a 20% gain to our visual on screen. That's actually a good thing. But to contrast it, just so we can see the difference, if we take that dot gain and we move it down to a 10%, we can see we actually are getting some colors in here. So what we're seeing on screen is trying to mimic what we're doing on press. Usually you get about a 15% dot gain. We'll keep it at that. And then again, that's only changing what we see on our screen. That's not actually changing the print at all. Some people will put in some custom profiles in your color settings. You can find those custom color profiles at any ink provider, whether it be Union Ink or whatever. I'm just using the default here. You can get into that, but I think for now we'll just keep it like it is. And what we're going to do now is rearrange some of these orders. You saw me do a little bit of that earlier. Let's put the dark gray on top of the white and just see what it will look like. Now it's not as pronounced, but you do see a little bit of shift. And what that is telling you is when you zoom in, these dark grays, it's not going to change at all. But because of dot gain, when you put that dark gray on top, we got a big color shift in here, and that's just visuals. Again, that's Photoshop on the monitor trying to simulate on press what's going to happen with that dot gain. Typically, if you're doing an index color separations, what you want to do is make the color order be from dark to light. And when I say from dark to light, we have our, as we lay down the ink on the shirt, the first thing we're going to do is put the underbase, and then we're going to put our dark colors, and then our light colors, and then our highlight white. And boom, our color separation is pretty much complete. One thing though I want to kind of highlight, and that's in this area right here. If we go into our underbase, let's make this underbase 100%. You notice right in here, we saw a step off. So let's make it 0%. There's no step off. Now let's make it 100%. You'll notice right in here, it's kind of hard to see on this screen, but when you put it on press, it's going to be very noticeable. It's one of the drawbacks to doing an underbase as an index, is that these step-offs here, you're going to see a hard line where your base is and where your base isn't. So there is a little bit of a way to kind of counteract that, and that's by making your base a halftone. Now, I said we were trying to avoid halftones, but sometimes in the base you do actually want to put a halftone color into your base. Now, that being said, if you don't have RIP software, you're not going to want to do this. If you do have RIP software, then your RIP software will interpret what I'm about to do here, and it will come out right. So we could say that we're done, but I'm going to adjust this base a little. To do that, let's make this dark gray selected here, and let's turn off our other channels. And where this dark gray is, I'm going to want to fill it with a halftone. And to fill it, I hit Shift Backspace, and we bring up our fill dialog, and we're going to fill it with white. And I'm just going to put it at 50%, hit OK. Now, what I just did was create halftones in our indexed base. What I did is, if we bring our where is it? Our eyedropper tool, and we bring it over this, you'll notice here that our K value here just went to 50%. And to see your values, what you do is you go Window, Info. You can also hit F8, and it will bring up your info box. It will probably show up here. You just drag that down. I always put it in the corner of my thing. So now I can bring my eyedropper tool and just kind of see, okay, so underneath that dark gray, if we put the dark gray over it, we're going to have a 50%. I think for that dark of a gray, a 50% base is actually better. What it will allow us to do is have less of a dropout as we move from gray here to with a base under it with no base over here, while keeping our base solid under the light gray and under the white. So again, we're assuming that we have RIP software that can interpret that 50%. If you don't have it, then keep your base solid, and if you don't have your RIP software, then keep your base solid. Alright, so we're pretty good to print. One thing I always like to do now is save as, and let's not save it over our original. So I'm going to call this design skull, and usually a shop will have its own naming conventions. For this tutorial, I'm just going to call it skull, the design name, color sep v1, and we'll save it. And now what I'm going to do is open up our original. That was our original, and I'm going to trim it and double click on that. So now I'm going to look at the original, which is here, and our index color separation here. And what I am noticing is a little bit more color value up in here, a little bit more contrast in there. For the most part though, it looks pretty good. What you can do is play with your ink colors on press. You may need to lighten this a little. So I'm seeing in here that it's looking a little weird. That's the original, and that's the index color separation. So it's looking a little weird. I'm thinking we might want to darken our light gray some. And to do that, we can go into here, select our color, and just kind of darken it up. Maybe to like in there. Hit OK. Now notice I did not go into my, which we can do, go into my color libraries and pick a color here. For an index color separation, some shops want you to do that and to give them a color to start with. But when you're actually doing the index color separation, you don't want to pick a halftone because it will change the patterns of your dots. I'm sorry, you don't want to pick an actual PMS color because it will change the pattern of your dots. This image would look totally different if I picked, say, knew I wanted a cool gray. You actually just put the cool gray on top of your, you decide that on press, really. Now, some people disagree with that, but I like to decide that on press. You can give them a starting point if you want. Let's just say, okay, so if I go to do an engineering sheet, I might put close to 425. That way they have a starting point and they can put some ink down. But in reality, you never really want to pick the colors from your computer monitor. You want to pick them from a color book. Really see how it is printing on the shirt. So again, now let's look. So this is the color set. That's the original color set, or original color set, original color set. And we're looking a little weird in there, but I think all in all this is going to print pretty good. One thing I'm noticing here is that if we look at this original, we look at the color set, getting a lot more value up in here than the original had. So let's go ahead and kind of edit this and kind of fix that up a little. We're going to take some of these dots out. To do that, we select our magic wand by hitting W and make sure caps lock's off, and we select these. Now I always hit Command or Control H to hide our marching dots. I turn off all these other colors here, and I select our white, so our white's in the foreground, and then I select my pencil tool. Most people say, oh, use the brush tool, but in this case all our anti-aliasing is off, and so we really want to maintain no anti-aliasing. Now my brush is kind of small here, so we'll make it a little bigger, and what we're going to do is just draw over these. Now we have to be kind of careful because we don't want to undo where there should be information. And if we turn on this light gray underbase in here, kind of can see, like, if I just, whoops, remember keep our white in the foreground. So let's undo that. White in the foreground here. We can kind of go through and just kind of clean some of this up. That's a little too much. What I'm doing is actually manipulating the films for their direct to screen directly. Now, this is kind of a harsh thing to do, so you want to be very careful. Now, if we go in here, remember I'm on my dark gray. What we can do is kind of go in here and just kind of clean it up. Now you'll notice right here, this is why I say you have to be pretty careful. Our base is actually showing through here. I go to my base and I turn off all these. You'll see that that is the actual underbase. So what we're going to do is also go back to pencil tool and do that. So if we look at it, now we took out that color in there. Base is still kind of showing through. So let's take this and just kind of go up into this. Remember, we did choke this, so we kind of want to maintain a choke. So on my base here, I'm deleting it. If you look just at my base, that's what it's looked like on my base. But if we turn these channels back on, you notice that it's coming over again. So that's a good thing. We always want to maintain our base being choked. And that's looking pretty good. Look, our base is showing through here, here. So this is where you want to be very careful not to have your base show through. Sometimes you'll have to redo your base to make sure that it's exact. But I think the shirt will print better if we keep that eye socket completely black. Another thing that I'm noticing here, we look at our original and look at our index color separation. These white spots in here are in the original, right? To me, they look kind of funky. Now, you have to be very super careful at deleting stuff like this, because if it's a customer supplied artwork, then sometimes they're going to want that in there even though it looks funky. But for this purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to take that out. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure that nothing is selected. Hit Control D or Command D if you're on a Mac. We're going to zoom in here and again select the pencil tool. Now, first let's just look to see where all these colors are. And what I am seeing is it's missing from the underbase, but we do have it. Nope, it is under the underbase. Let's delete it from the underbase. Let's go to our dark gray. That's all gone. Let's go to our light gray. Delete that from our light gray and look at our white. Delete it from our white. So now we zoom out. We turn back on the color set. And we'll notice in here that's missing, which is good if we took it out. It is in the original. This is the original. And it's there. So I see that same thing up in here. So let's go ahead and we're back onto our color set. And we'll go to our underbase first. Select the pen tool. Not pen tool, the pencil tool. We'll delete that. And we'll delete that. Go to our dark gray. Delete that. Delete that. Go to our light gray. And just kind of do the same thing in there. And then go to our white. And delete that. Delete that. Again, you have to be very super careful. One, your client may want that in there. Two, you may take it out one layer and forget to do the next layer. Something like this, where we only have 4 colors really. It's pretty easy to do, but if you have like 8 colors, 12 colors, you have to go through each individual one. Make sure you take that stuff out. But to me it looks good. Seeing some more white right in here. I don't know what that is. I mean, it is in the original. It is there. I don't know. We could keep it in. We could take it out. I'm going to take it out. So again, go to our underbase and very carefully take it out of our underbase. Very carefully take it out of our dark gray, light gray, and then our white. And to me, that's going to print a little better. So, I think we're looking pretty good. What at this point I would do is do a save as and call it version 2. That way we have one with it and one without. And I kind of get a little progression going here with my artwork. And if I want to go back and say, oh no, the client wants it in there, I have a saved file with it in there and a saved file with it out. So at this point, let's go ahead and output it to film. So to do that, it's pretty easy. The first thing we want to do is, remember we did save a PSD. So our save, we can't even save if we wanted to, but we can do a save as, and that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to delete these composite channels. And we're not using this underbase. That was the bad one, remember? And we're not going to be printing the shirt color. So we'll delete that. The image looks really super weird this way, but that's just how it goes. Do a save as. And we save it as a Photoshop DCS 2.0. That's in an EPS format, which means we're going to bring it into Illustrator. So on this dialog box here, we want to Some people will have it at 8-bit. Some people will have it 1-bit. I like 8-bit. It shows a little better. Single file, no composite. We took our composite out anyway. Encoding doesn't matter what you do there. I always keep it as defaults and keep everything unchecked. I hit OK. And what that did was it saved our file as a version 2 here, EPS. So at this point, I'm in Illustrator, and I am going to go ahead and make a new document. And then what I'm going to do is, this new document is set up so that it's pretty much the same width as my film printer. If you were doing direct to screen, you would set it up the same size as your screen. And I'm going to put registration marks and stuff on this. But first we need to place that file we just saved. So we go to place and we find the version 2 EPS that we saved and we place it. Now you'll notice this file is pretty big. A lot bigger than my artboard, so we make our artboard a little bigger. In fact, I'm going to make it an exact value. We'll call it 15 inches. So then I like to center my artwork onto my artboard. So I make sure my art's selected, and I go in and put exact center values. Now my art's centered on my artboard, and you'll notice it looks really kind of janky. Don't worry, it's just a bitmap placed into Illustrator. It's only looking janky on our monitor. Another thing I like to do is kind of clean up my file a little bit here. So in my swatch boxes here, I select all unused, and I delete those. And I know for a fact I don't have any processed black or white. So I hold down Control and select them and then hit delete. So these are my actual colors here. And what happens here is I like to make my underbase a really wild color. Usually a yellow, but everyone has their own preference. And then I make my white a really wild white, and I hit OK. Now it doesn't exactly show the color that I did, because remember, if we go back to our actual separations here, I put my underbase at 65% solidity. And that actually translates when you bring it over into Illustrator, which we're in now. So that really bright white that I did here in Illustrator is actually at 85%. My underbase is at 65%. That's okay. It's only how it appears on your screen. When we do our films or direct to screen, these will be all black, so the color doesn't even really matter here. That'll all be determined on press. And so from here, what you can do is create your registration marks, or you can go into your print dialog, and you'll notice, well, this computer doesn't have any RIP software connected to it, so I can't exactly show you the print dialog, but you'd go into your color separations and do it that way. But really what we want to do here is create some registration marks. Let's see if I can do it here. Go to output. Yeah, see, it's all composite. I don't have any RIP software connected to this computer. But you can go on marks, you could put these trim marks, and you could do all this kind of stuff. I like a little bit more control than that print dialog box, so I always create my own registration marks. And I actually have a few saved. Now on your computer you won't have a few saved, but I do. And you can save. So I go to my symbols and registration marks, and I have one saved here, which I just throw on the artboard and then unlink it. Again, everyone will have their own different way of doing that, but it looks like here we have a linked file and a registration, so that's good. I'm going to zoom out just a little by hitting Control minus. I'm going to select this, make sure it's unlinked, yeah. And it looks like I'm going to group those together and bring it out of that group. Alright, so now we have it in a group. Let's throw that away. That was weird. Alright, so here's our registration mark. We can call it as such. Now if we look here, one way to know that it's registration is it is a stroke, so let's select it. It is a stroke, and if we go into our swatches, that is registration. And that's the black we want. What that means is that it's going to show up on all the films. If we were to make it yellow, or underbase as that is called, it would just show up under the underbase. But we really want it as registration, so it shows up on all films. And we want to center it. So I select both and then double click on that on the artwork, and then I click that one, and that centers it to the design. And we're basically gonna just do the same thing for the bottom registration and center it. And I'm gonna paste it and do to a side registration, and of course center it. And one last one on the other side. And make sure it's centered again. Now, this is looking pretty good. Let's move this up a little. Put it at the top of our artboard so that you can tape it off on the screen. What I always like to do is name the film. So we called this Skull, and then I like to put what it's going on, or whether or not it's front or back. So I do adult t-shirt front. So we're going to print this on the front of the design, and then I'm going to hit Control-Shift-O, and that basically creates outlines. And then I'm going to make sure that it is a registration swatch, so that it shows up on all the films. And then I like to name my colors. So at this point you could do PMS callouts, but for the purposes of this video I'm going to just call it my callouts. So we did and I like to do it in the same order. So a dark gray is going, no, it's going to be an underbase first, and then a dark gray, and then a light gray, and then a white. And then I create outlines for those by hitting Command or Control-Shift-O, and I group it, and then I assign the colors. So let's assign these so that it only prints on that plate or that film. Light gray. Make sure I did this as dark gray. And then we'll call this white. And then when this prints out, we can look here in our separations preview. If we go to Overview, if we look here, we have our dark gray, we have our light gray, and let's just turn off these others. So that's our dark gray. Notice that's registrations all printing on that. And then we have our light gray. This is kind of pre-flighting before you actually spend money and print films here. We have our underbase, and then we have our white. It's all looking pretty good. One thing you can do here is make sure that you have no CMYK values. That means everything's assigned as spot. Had I not assigned this, so let's just go to our default books, and this is just to show you what it would look like if I had messed up. Let's go to our default swatches, basic RBG, and I assign that to basic RBG here. Actually, instead of that one, let's get out of separations preview here. Make sure all this is selected. Let's get out of separation preview here. Go back to our layers. Let's say I forgot to assign my underbase here, and instead it was a process color, say a process black. If I go into my color separations preview here and I turn off all my spot colors, you'll notice that's going to show up. And that's not a good thing. That means we're going to print out extra films. We want to make sure that when we pre-flight this, when we're just about ready to hit print, we always go into our color separations and make sure everything's assigned spot. So what I'm going to do is assign that spot. And again, that yellow is our underbase. Even though it looks yellow on the screen, it will print out black when we do our separations. So let's go back and just kind of look at it, make sure everything's how we want it. This is a point where you could add in some text. Call it Kleanfx, and let's just do a simple font here. Say we wanted to put that there. You could add in text at this point. Let's make sure it's assigned spot. We don't have a black, so, you know, say we were going to make it white. Remember, I made this bright yellow white, so. And at that point, you could hit print. Now, I don't want text in that, but I could add text at this point. So here, what I normally do is I name my files. So this is the artwork. These are my callouts. This is my header. These registration marks I can group up. Call it registration. And then that's the linked file, so we'll call this indexed artwork. And we're looking pretty good, so let's save this. And at this point, you save it a naming convention that your shop has. So every shop's going to be a little different here. I'm going to call it Skull Final Output and hit save. And sometimes it's good to save it as LS. I'm going to keep it as CC. Doesn't really matter, but if you have, you know, say the partner next to you is using Adobe CC or CS6, this is where you would save it as that. I also like to include linked files. That's the file that we actually placed in here. It's going to make the file a lot bigger, but if we ever try to send this file to someone, or the original gets moved or something like that, that we placed in here, if we include linked files, we're good to go. So I hit OK, OK. And this is actually ready to send out. So at this point, I'd go to my print, and had I a RIP software in here, I would send it to the RIP. I guess I could do it as a PDF and just kind of show you how the films would look. I already included all my printer marks, so we're going to do this as in RIP separations or separations host space. That part doesn't matter. We want positive films. Lines per inch, your RIP software will determine that. Yeah. Actually, it doesn't really matter at this point because I'm doing it as a PDF, but you could do it as a, your RIP software really will handle all this. Now, one thing to note here is that we have no little printers under CMYK. That's a good thing. What that means is that there's nothing that's processed in the design. And that's what we want, nothing that's processed in the design. We also have all our spot colors selected. Now, if we go to summary here, sorry, let's go to color, no, let's go to advanced here. Overprints, we want to make sure that our overprints are preserved. And the reason being is we put that underbase underneath. If we discard the underbase or discard overprints, that underbase will not print. It will print that the callout for the underbase, but because the other colors are on top of it, it will actually make that go away. So I always like to do high resolution. I look at my summary here. Notice I don't have any kind of warnings. Now this is where sometimes we'll get out of gamut colors. If these were not spot, say they were lab color, and then I go to my print dialog, a lot of times in the summary it will tell you that we have out of gamut colors, especially if you're using like a CS6 or CS4. Don't really worry about that too much. Just know that a lot of times here, you just want to make sure that these are spot. So I'm going to change it back to CMYK. So at this point, I could hit print. So again, defined by driver is not good. So, okay. So we don't want to auto rotate, and we want this at custom. So we're ready to hit print, and this should come out like we want it to. So I'm going to hit print, and we'll save it as final output and save it to my desktop. Now at this point your printer would start working, but since I don't have a RIP software connected to this thing, it's actually just going to print to a file on my desktop. And it's doing so now. And so this is what we get here. This is what your films would look like. So we'll notice we have our underbase and then our dark gray. Oh, I know what happened. So our registration got cut off here. And that's because when I went to print, I originally did custom, but then I rotated it. So make sure we do not scale. I don't know why this is weird, because in the RIP software it will make it the right size. Huh. So we'll make this width 16.6. Now I'll save it. Yes, I want to replace it. Alright, so now we have our registration marks on each side. And so if we didn't have RIP software, the Acrobat will do it for you. But now if we look in here and we zoom in, now zoom in, not find, zoom in, zoom in. Notice this is all bitmapped. But since we did our underbase the way we did our underbase, oh, I see, yeah, the RIP software kept it at 50%. So, because I did it in PDF, it didn't do halftone dots here. But if we sent it through RIP software, that 50% right there would actually be halftone dots. You could simulate it, but for the purposes of this video, we're fine. So that's about it. That's how we do an index color separation to print out some films. If you have any questions, please comment. And if you like the video, like it. And if you like what I'm doing, subscribe. Hope you liked it all. Talk to you later. Bye.